We are almost 9 hours into a government shutdown after Congress was unable to reach an agreement to keep the government open and to fund the government. So how will lawmakers work their way out of this stalemate? And is this just a prequel to the upcoming fight, many would argue, the bigger fight over the debt ceiling? Senator Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky, he's joining us exclusively from Capitol Hill. Senator, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. From your perspective, where do things go from here this morning?
Well, you know, I've had a couple of suggestions, and one suggestion is that when we disagree, historically we've gone to conference committee. You have Republicans in the House who want to alter or compromise on Obamacare. You have Senate Democrats unwilling to. So if you have a disagreement, you come together with equal number Republicans, equal number Democrats, and you find a compromise.
Not a bad idea. That's something that House Republicans, they moved to do after things fell apart yesterday. I spoke with Senator Dick Durbin earlier in the show, and he said that Democrats, they would be open to going to conference. But first, they want to see House Republicans pass a stopgap funding measure. And as Harry Reid said, they don't want to go to conference with a gun held to their heads. Is that something you could support?
Well, I think what we could do is we could pass a very short term, maybe not 6 weeks, but what about 1 week so we can negotiate over a week? I think a continuing bill to keep the government open while we negotiate is a good idea. I do agree that negotiating with the government closed probably to them appears like strong-arm tactics. So if we keep the government open, but I think it needs to be short-term enough that we are having an active negotiation, that we don't just say, oh, we're going to fund it for 3 months or 2 months and come back. I think if we did it for a week or two, I think we could still continue to negotiate, have a conference committee, and really I think the American people do want us to work this out.
That might be the first glimmer of hope I've heard all morning, so I appreciate it. You know, Democrats will also argue that they've been calling for you've been calling for going to conference for quite a while. Democrats say they've also been saying that for a while, to go to conference to hammer out these budget issues. Do you think Speaker Boehner then made a mistake that he didn't make a move to go to conference earlier, because this was their kind of their last straw last night?
All right. Well, I think that to go to conference, it takes both sides agreeing to it. I don't think that the House has been against it. I think the interesting thing about this process is that we've offered a lot of different compromises. Our first position really wasn't so much a compromise. We don't want Obamacare. We think it's a bad idea and going to hurt people, so we offered to get rid of it completely. But that didn't pass, and so we offered a compromise to say, look, you've been delaying other parts of it. Why don't we delay the whole thing for a year? That, I think, is a compromise position. That was rejected. We then offered to delay only the individual mandate. The president has unilaterally done it with the employer mandate. That's another compromise that's been rejected. Now we're offering also a clean CR for a week or two. But then my understanding is that Senator Reid has rejected that out of hand as well. So really, we're offering a series of moving compromises, trying to get a middle position, and we haven't gotten anything back from the Democrats that they're willing to compromise.
And how do you respond then to Democrats who say, but you're beginning from an irrational bargaining position? They don't think that these budget negotiations should have anything to do with the president's health care law. Just keep the government funded and fight it out separately.
Right. I think that anytime you disagree, if you and I disagree and I start out by calling you irrational, we're not going to get anywhere. I mean, obviously, when we disagree, we don't like the premise of the other person's position. Okay. But the thing is that funding is a function of Congress. So a law is passed, but how we fund it and how we modify that law over time, it doesn't mean from here till the end of time Obamacare is everything the president wanted it to be. The president's been modifying his own plan over the last several months. Should Congress not be part of that? Some of us think it's illegal for the president to do it without our authority. So really, I think we should be part of the mix, and he shouldn't get 100% of Obamacare as he wants it without any input from Republicans as well as the rest of the country.
So, Senator, kind of how this end stage kind of kicked off was you stood with Senator Ted Cruz in that marathon protest on the Senate floor. When you look at that, where you stood there and where we are today, do you think that protest helped or hurt negotiations? I ask that because we are hearing more and more some moderate Republicans in the House saying things like the Ted Cruz wing of the party in terms of criticizing how things have been handled.
You know, I think it was helpful to talk more about, we haven't had a big debate about Obamacare really since it passed in Congress. And so I think it was helpful to have the debate. I'll give you an example. I'm going on the exchanges. I'm going to have to buy my insurance on the Obamacare exchanges. In my state, there's only going to be 2 insurance companies. Used to be 30. Now there's going to be 2. And one of my choices doesn't cover me out of state. So when I travel up here, and because of all this shutdown, I have a heart attack, I want my insurance to cover me here, but under Obamacare, it's not going to cover me in Washington. So, I mean, there's a lot of problems with this that if we don't work it out, we're just going to cause millions of people to go into these exchanges and they're not ready.
Well, let's hope that never happens. No heart attacks, no matter what happens in the job. I'll say that. Real quick, Senator, Democrats, the president, they say that Republicans will be blamed. They're blaming Republicans for this government shutdown. The polls that we have, and I know that you love to debate methodology, but the polls that we have say that Republicans are going to face more of the blame now that the government is shut down. Does that concern you at all?
I think what we ought to do is argue about right and wrong. So, for example, right now we're borrowing $30,000 every second. We have $17 trillion in debt. We're adding nearly $1 trillion in debt every year. That's because we continue to spend what's called a continuing resolution without reforming it. So I don't think we can go on. And while I don't want to shut down government, and I would be for short-term solutions to keep it open, I think we do sometimes have to make a stand and say enough's enough. We're spending our kids' future, and we can't keep doing it this way.
Senator Rand Paul, always great to have your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Of course.